Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you all for being here on this Friday. It's sun's out. We're here for a preview of the forthcoming book, This Is Not For You, An Activist's Journey of Resistance and Resilience by Richard Brown and Brian Benson. The book tells the story of activist and photographer Richard Brown, a Black Portlander who has spent decades working to bridge the divide between police and the Black community. His memoir brings readers with him into the streets with fellow activists, into squad cars with the rank and file, and to regular meetings with mayors and police chiefs. The authors are joined today by special guest Avel Louise Gordly, whose own memoir, Remembering the Power of Words, The Life of an Oregon Activist, Legislator, and Community Leader, is also published by OSU Press. I'm Marty Brown. I'm the marketing manager here at OSU Press. I want to give special thanks today to OSU's Office of Institutional Diversity for sponsoring today's event, along with all the other amazing programming they put together for this year's annual Martin Luther King celebration. I hope you've all had a chance to enjoy and be inspired by some of those other events. Before I introduce our moderator and panelists, I just want to share a few details about today's event. Although This Is Not For You won't be published until March, it's available for pre-order on the OSU Press website, as is Remembering the Power of Words. I'll be sharing links in the chat window shortly, along with a discount code that'll be good for 30% off and free shipping. I also want to note that half of the royalties on sales of This Is Not For You will be donated to organizations working on behalf of Black Portlanders. So if that's not incentive, I don't know what is. We'll leave time toward the end for a Q&A session, so please send your questions to me via the Q&A chat window. And with that, it's my great honor to introduce today's panelists and moderators. Our moderator is Sienna Kaske. She's the George P. Griffis Publishing Intern at OSU Press. She's a senior at Oregon State studying ethnic studies and writing. She's an organizer, storyteller, and radical imaginer who works to transform and build an equitable and anti-racist world. Author Richard Brown is originally from Harlem. He landed in Portland after serving in a newly desegregated Air Force. He's a community activist and photographer who works tirelessly to empower Black people and to bridge the gap between the police and the Black community. Richard's co-author, Brian Benson, is the author of Going Somewhere. Originally from Wisconsin, Brian now lives in Portland, where he teaches writing at the Attic Institute. Today's special guest, Avel Louise Gordly, is the first African-American woman elected to the Oregon State Senate, where she served 3 terms, after serving 3 terms in the House of Representatives. She has received numerous awards for her work as a legislator and community organizer on behalf of many organizations, including the Black United Front, Portlanders Organized for Southern African Freedom, and the American Friends Service Committee, and the Urban League of Portland, and the list goes on. She lives in Portland, where she's retired as a professor from the Black Studies Department at Portland State University. And with that, I will hand the virtual podium over to Sienna.
Thank you so much, Marty. And like Marty said, this is such an amazing experience, and it's such an honor to be here with you all today, and in honor of Dr. King's legacy too, which is probably one of the most important things. And this conversation will be really fruitful and talking about intergenerational change and movements. And I'm, again, excited to have this conversation. And so we'll just kick it right off. And my first question for you all is you both in your books talk about how to make change and how to drive change. And also with Dr. King's legacy, we have to learn about past social movements in order to know what we want to build in the future. And so I would really love to hear from you all, what can we learn from past social movements to help us continue fighting for change in the present? Richard, do you want to start us off?
Certainly. I think one of the important things that we have to do is learn why things in the past failed. And through that, we'll learn how to do things differently. And we've got to be pretty clear about the results that we want. I think a lot of times people get together around an issue and they sit down at the table and they come out of that meeting and it's a different issue. Mm-hmm. You got to be really, you need to know what it is you want to change. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times we don't do that.
Yeah. And just before this conversation, I was talking with Avel, and Avel, you mentioned how we have to know who we are. and what that history is. So what do you think about past social movements in order to change today?
What I've learned and continue to appreciate is that the change that is possible happens through relationships, relationship building. It happens through open hearts. It happens recognizing that, you know, to do the work of correcting social ills, to work for that which is right and just and fair, it requires being intentional. And again, it requires a great deal of patience and again, a great deal of valuing and respect for relationships, building relationships. And all of that is hard work, hard and heart work.
Definitely. And I love that you touched on relationships because, you know, Brian and Richard, you have a co-author relationship to bring forth This Is Not For You, which is a fabulous book. So Brian, like, what about, how do you come to this question about past social movements in order to change today? You might have some.
I think back to what I said, and sorry if my Zoom connection is bad. It seems like it might be. Am I coming through?
Yeah.
Okay. I think I'll call back to what Richard said, just about learning from the past. I mean, I don't want to take up my changes, but I've learned a ton from them, and I think intergenerationally, just being able to pay attention and listen to what's been done before, learning from what hasn't worked, as Mr. Brown said, but also from what has, and then also, you know, from my own perspective, just using any power and privilege that I have, any positioning that I have in society to help work for social change and to undermine some of the systems that gave me that privilege in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you did cut off in the beginning, but we heard you in the end. And so thank you for saying that. And with that too, in my own studies as an ethnic studies student, I've paid particular attention to Oregon and the history of white supremacy in Oregon and how it was founded as a white utopia. And last year I got to take a course called Ethnic Minorities in Oregon, which we did a specific study on just the history of Portland and those that have been organizing in Portland over the years. So like, I've already studied a little bit about y'all and the work that you've done. And so to be here today and talking with you is fabulous. And I want to get more specific to Portland because in both of your books, you both are talking about Portland. And I want to know about the specific organizations that you both were a part of in the coalition building that y'all did. And so you both were involved with the Black United Front, the Black Education Center, and you both did anti-apartheid movement work in Portland. And I want to know, during these times, why was it important to collectively organize, and how did you build coalition in Portland? Avel, you want to kick us off?
I'm going to go back to that word relationships. You know, we did our work at a time when we weren't dependent on Facebook, you know, the technology that we know of today wasn't available to us then. So, you know, being up close and personal and was really important. I think about how we used to do our telephone trees when we needed to get in contact with each other about something that was coming up. And those telephone trees were they were also a lifeline. That's how you found out how people were doing, what was going on in their family, if they needed assistance with anything. And then of course, you know, you got down to the business of what work needed to be done. But I think our organizing happened during a time when when we really valued the relationship building. and seeing and being in the presence of one another. I think about the Thursday night meetings of the Black United Front every Thursday night, like clockwork, at the King Neighborhood Facility. You know, hundreds of people coming out to talk about a particular issue and to plan and to strategize and to move together. But again, all of that happened through relationship building.
Definitely.
Yeah.
What about you, Jay?
And I can only support that. It's all about relationships. And the great thing about the Black issues is they cross so many boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
So for an example, I was involved with the environment. Avel and I both were involved around issues of the environment. Well, we were able to bring people to our issues through our involvement with what they were doing. You know, we're involved in Central America work. We were able to get those folks, you know, at least to begin to understand what we were doing. And because there was that relationship, you know, the sad part is it seems like we're the ones always extending the hand. But again, it works for us. It works for us. You know, when we were fighting against education issues, Black folks aren't the only one that aren't learning. You know, we were able to get poor white folks involved because they were having the same issues we were. So it's about all of it's about relationships. You know, the challenge is once you build those relationships to keep those folks involved with you, you know, even if it's, you know, when you're getting ready to do a demonstration, say, you can call them up and they'll show up. You know, but a lot of times, you know, we talk about our phone trees. See, they didn't have caller ID then. So there was no sorting through your phone calls. When it rang, you picked it up. Now you have caller ID. So those folks who may have been allies, oh, he's gonna want something, she's gonna want something. So they choose not to be home. You know, so that it's gotten difficult. And that makes that one-on-one relationship really important.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So you both talked about education, and the Black Education Center closed in the 90s. But I want to know more about like what, how important was the Black Education Center to the Portland community at that time?
Well, it wasn't important enough because it stopped.
True.
You know, and I think that new things are hard for people to grasp. You know, when everybody's talking about we are the world, it's hard to say, I want my child to go to a school where the curriculum is all about Black folk. You know, especially when you haven't been exposed to stuff like that. You know, one of the things that I'll never forget is that, you know, a lot of the textbooks we used were textbooks that everybody used, but we call it the faces. You know, so, and even if the youngsters didn't get the fact that we were being inclusive in doing it, they went, well, why did they color the faces? You know, so that's a question that they'll have, and they will begin to understand why that happened. You know, they'll have some sense about who they are.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that too. For my third question, I want to talk about Dr. King, because you both bring him up in both of your books. And Avel, you mentioned in Remembering the Power of Words that you met Bayard Rustin, who was a key civil rights leader who often goes unnoticed because he was gay. And I learned about him in a class last term, and I am just really interested in learning more about movement leaders. And I want to know more about like what y'all think about the civil rights movement and other movements happened after, and is it similar or different to the Black Lives Matter movement that we're in today? And like, what can we take from the past and apply it to current activism?
Well, let me pick up on Bayard Rustin first, because the meeting with him, that connection happened in Johannesburg, South Africa. And it happened on the day that the South African government had declared an emergency, meaning a state of war. And there were a number of us traveling who were confined, quarantined at the Johannesburg airport. And so you had this room full of, passengers, not knowing when or if we were going to be able to get on a plane to travel back home. And at one point, we looked over, we meaning the three of us who were traveling as delegates from the American Friends Service Committee. I was director of the Southern Africa program at that time for AFSC in Portland. We looked over and there was Bear Gruston. And so that's how we met and made a connection. What's striking to me when I think about that particular person and personality and his contributions, Bear Gruston's contributions to the March on Washington, we're talking about August 1963, his contributions as a strategic thinker, planner, were highly significant. The fact that he was gay, that didn't come up. That wasn't, now we talk about movements that are intersectional, interconnected. We embrace all of who he was then, now, but that wasn't true then. I think the Black Lives Matter movement is a continuation or an evolution of what has been the movement for civil rights, human rights for decades. And I think one of the other things that's true about the Black Lives Matter movement that was true about the civil rights movement of the late 50s and into the 60s is that it was young people. If you go back and look at some of the books, especially the books with pictures, Richard will appreciate this, of the young people who were out in the streets protesting during that time. Those were young people, those were teenagers, and sometimes younger than that. And I know one of the things that really hit my heart hard was the murder of the 4 little girls in the church in Alabama, the bombing in the church in Alabama in the 60s. That happened when I was a teenager and I was in high school, and that impressed me to this day, and affected my choices around getting involved in community activism. If you look at Richard Brown's photos from our period of activism from the late 70s up through into the 90s, if you look at those pictures, again, look for the young faces, but then again, look for the intergenerational faces of all the people who came out and participated in the struggle for equality, non-racist education for Black children, certainly, but equality, non-racist education for all children. Look at his photos that document the marches against racist violence, the marches against police brutality. I think that's another book, but that's another story. And that's something for Richard to talk about. But I think he's got a treasure of photos that at some point, hopefully, we'll be looking at that treasure too.
Thank you. I never look at our struggles. I don't segment it. There's no time frame. There may be some benchmarks, but the struggle, the issues have always been the same. You know, people get fed up at different times, and out of that being pissed off, they come up with whatever it is they come up with, you know. So I don't get into that, you know, trying to rationalize who's doing what. The problems have been there long enough, and there are enough issues for anybody that wants to do anything to get in there and give it a shot, you know, and become leaders and become movers and shakers. You know, the interesting thing is, when I was growing up, Dr. King wasn't a big deal. You know, the brothers and sisters I knew weren't about turning no cheek. You know, if you hit me, I'm gonna try to tear your head off. But what I realized was, back then, there were people that didn't feel that way about it, and they were a lot older. And as I've got older, Martin Luther King has become more relevant. When I was young, I thought I could whip everybody. You know, you get older, you realize, you know, you're not gonna be able to whip everybody. So you got to come up with different ways. But I think that I remember being in Detroit for the Poor People's March, and Dr. King was there. Nobody cared about, or let me not say nobody. There were a lot of people in my generation that didn't, it wasn't a big deal, you know? So I think that the issues haven't changed. You know, we've become more sophisticated in about how we deal with them. And in being so sophisticated, we've allowed the outcome of a lot of the issues to be, well, let's study this. You know, so it gets studied for 10 years and everybody goes back to sleep. And then something happens and it wakes everybody up again, you know, and in that awakening, you have another crop of people that think about things differently. And, you know, I don't criticize them. Everybody needs to figure this out. You know, we didn't figure it all out in my generation. Generations before me didn't figure it all out. And I hope these youngsters out there figure it out.
Yeah.
You know.
Yes. We might not figure it all out. Maybe the next generation will have to figure it out.
Exactly. But you build on it.
Exactly.
And it's things like this that have got to continue to happen. You know, we're passing this information on because a lot of times the youngsters don't know about the information.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times, you know, everybody goes to sleep. That's not just the activists, you know, average folks that have been screwed over, go to sleep. Oh, that's the way they do it. And then somebody says, man, I don't like this. And then we start all over again. You know, but we haven't been consistent enough in people going back to find out what's going on and people that are going forward to let people know what's going on. And you know, and that's an issue because the young folks want to do it their way. They don't want to do it the way we did it. And in a lot of cases, they don't even want to hear about how we did it. You know, and I think that's a mistake.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. I definitely think we need to be learning from those who've been fighting for change for decades. Like even before the Black Freedom Movement and everything. It's like, I want to go back to those that have been fighting since contact with Europeans. And so I appreciate what you said. Oh, Avel, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I want to pick up on this. You know, what we have here is an opportunity to take the work of Richard Brown and his co-author, Brian Benson, to take the power in the stories that he's sharing in the book, This Is Not For You, and make sure that it gets into the hands and heads of young people in our schools. We need to be intentional about that. Our books belong in the schools. Our stories need to be shared and heard and understood by the young people who are coming along through, especially through our public school system. Portland Public Schools ought to have "This Is Not For You" in there, available to students.
Mm.
And it makes me think of, you know, we're on the tail end of our lives. I know Richard is 80 now, or 81. I'm going to be 74 on my next birthday in February. We're still here. We're still here. And the lives we've led and the stories that some of the stories that we're sharing about those lives are in the books, but the books need to be intentionally shared with the student population that's out there. And that's where OSU Press has a role in being part of that intentional delivering of what we've put together, our gifts. Get the message out there. It's what I'm trying to say. And I feel so, you know, I'm not aware of another institution that is an Oregon press that has captured the stories of significant Black people who have lived their lives out loud in Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
When is that going to happen again? I don't know, but it's happening now. It's a big deal. It's a big deal. And I think when I think of Richard, his gift and his story, it is a gift. It is a gift, and we need to receive it in that way.
Yes, I agree. And I kind of want to hear the gift itself. Richard, would you want to read?
Before we do that, that getting the word out, and that kind of speaks to the name of the book. This is not for you, right? And the story is, when I was in high school, on Broadway, there was a play, Tea and Sympathy, and it had some adult themes in it, adult for back then. And when the English teacher brought them in, she brought in, we were discussing the play, and she brought in some playbill magazines that had the play in them, and she put them on a table. And we talked about the play, and she said, well, there's some books over there with the play in it, but they're not for you. And I was the first one to get one. You know, who is she to tell me what I can do? You know, and that was the first play that I ever read for entertainment, you know. So I'm hoping that when the cops see the book, hey, who the hell do you think he is telling me what I can do? And they'll go ahead and buy it.
Definitely. But with that, Richard, we would love to hear you read from This Is Not For You.
I'm going to give that attempt. That's not one of my strong suits, reading, because I know the information that I want to ad lib there. So, but I'm going to try. And how much time should I take?
I take about, I don't know, how much time do you want?
Okay, not long.
Okay, do it. You do it so you feel good.
Okay, are we getting any questions?
Not yet, but.
Oh, okay, all right. How it begins today and yesterday and probably tomorrow. I'm standing alone in a ballroom miles from home, getting ready to talk to a white cop who won't want to listen. This cop, he's over by some coffee urns, holding court with two other white men in shirt sleeves. They look at him like he's just walked on water, probably saying how much they liked his speech, the one he gave a few days ago to kick off this conference, a national conference on community policing. That's why I want to talk to him too. because I saw that speech and I didn't love it. And because this man is not your average cop, he's also a scholar, a lawyer, and the director of the organization putting on this conference. He's a leader of cops, a cop other cops learn from. And I need him to learn from me. I check my wristwatch. It's barely noon. There are more talks today, and seeing them is the whole reason I came all the way to Tempe. But after 3 days of sitting and standing, standing and sitting, walking from panels to trainings to lunch to more panels, I'm tired. I'd like to go to my room, just sit at the window and enjoy the fleeting feeling of looking at something new. But I can't do that because what this man said and what he didn't say bothered me. And the thing I've learned is, if I don't bring up what bothers me, who will? My name is Richard Brown. By the way, I'm retired. I've been thinking lately of having some cards made that just say Richard Brown, retired. Some folks think my cards should say activist, but I don't know. I've never felt the need to advertise that. And anyway, activist. It feels too broad, or maybe not broad enough. My friend Ronnie once said, I'm like a geodesic dome. At any one time, you can only see a few panels. But if you move around me, you'll find more and more and more. So maybe what I really need is a whole deck of cards. Richard Brown, photographer. Richard Brown, walking news quote. Richard Brown, grandpa to all. Richard Brown, black man in a white room. That last card, that's the one I need today. I'm in a Mission Palms Hotel in Tempe for the Problem-Oriented Policing Conference, an annual affair for the few who care or profess to care about community policing. Probably if you've ever heard of community policing, you think it's an add-on, an a la carte. Just a few officers shaking hands and petting kitties while the rest do the real work. But community policing is a philosophy, a religion, is the ethos of a police force that partners top to bottom with civilians on problems that lead to crime. I know this because for a while, police in my city actually adopted this philosophy. Those were good years. They were hopeful years. They were long, long ago. I'm thirsty. I head to a cooler and fill a paper cup. As I drink, I scan. There are a few hundred people here, but I'm one of a dozen civilians and maybe only one Black. By now, I'm pretty much used to this. I spend a lot of time with cops. I've ridden along with them, walked the crime scenes with them, trained their trainers, gone to their weddings. For a time, I was a regular at these conferences. But lately, I've been out of the loop. I guess that's why I came, to see what I've missed, what's changed. I wish I was more surprised to say that not much has changed. These last few days, I've sat through dozens of presentations by cops about their successes in community policing. A trio from Washington explained how they tidied up a cluster of hotels at the center of a prostitution ring. A group from England told us about cleaning up a neighborhood plagued with drunk brawls. A few officers from my home of Portland, Oregon, spoke about engaging the community in an effort to deal with drug dealing and violence on a corner near campus police. That bugged me. It bugged me because I live in that community. For years I've lived there, blocks from the campus. And I'm telling you, Portland police didn't engage anyone. No regular people, at least. The project wasn't about regular people. If it had been, they'd have helped us with what we wanted on that corner decades ago, when crack was flooding the streets, when kids were killing kids, when we were telling police exactly how we wanted it to be changed. They didn't listen. Not until last year, when the college president, keen to clean things up in advance of a campus expansion, began talking about stopping violence. Then the cops engaged. They sat down with that president and some business owners, and they made a plan. And then they got up in front of TV cameras and told the rest of us about it. That's what gets me. Police know how to do community policing. They just do it mostly with people who already have power. This cop is over there talking with his fans. I can't tell if he's noticed me or not. Probably. I'm kind of hard to miss. Today, like most days, I'm wearing a suit, a hat, purple shirt, tan bow tie, and a sterling tube on my lapel, a tussie mussy it's called. That holds a purple silk flower. I got the tussie mussy idea from a TV show based on one of Agatha Christie's detective stories. But the bow tie, that's me. I've worn one most days for as long as I can recall. It gets attention, and it makes it easier for white folks who can describe me as the guy with the bow tie instead of just that black guy. Off to the left, something flashes. The skin behind my ears goes tight. And I spin left, reach down for my camera, and now here it comes, the double disappointment. The flash, I think it was an overhead light strobing off a mic stand. And I'm not even carrying my camera. Used to be I didn't miss a picture, not one. My feeling was anything changed around me, it could be something good or bad. I wasn't going to miss it. Honestly, that's still my feeling, but lately I've missed it a lot. Take yesterday. I walked around Tempe for 3 hours on streets full of people in softening lights, but I didn't take a single photo, and that hurts. Because for years, taking pictures was all I did. I photographed thousands of black faces and a lot of white ones too. For a time, I couldn't go outside without someone asking, hey, wasn't I the picture man? And I was always, until one day I stopped. Just like that, I stopped. Stepped away from my camera and into the frame. I've stayed there for decades. I thought I have no regrets. No regrets about where I've been, where I've gone, what I've done, or why. I do miss taking pictures. Every morning I tell myself, I'll start again. And every evening I tell myself again. Finally, this cop is on the move. He's walking like he's being watched. Chin up, shoulders back. I really don't want to talk to him. Just thinking about it makes me tired. After years of making people listen to what I have to say without responding to us, about treating black boys like black boys, I'm wearing down. And the best way I can explain it is, this thing has been happening. The thing is, I start crying. I start and I can't stop. I'm not one of those men who's got a thing about men who cry. I have nothing against criers. I just never was one, not until lately. But lately, whenever I flick on the TV, I end up on one of those dramas where somebody's struggling to make a difference, struggling hard until near the end. With everything against them, they break through and they make it. Or hell, maybe they don't. I couldn't tell you. Usually by that point, I can barely even see the screen. And now here comes this cop about to stride right past me. If I'm going to talk to him, it's got to happen now. So I muster a smile and extend my hand. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I love hearing your voice. Yeah, I just round of applause wherever you are. Thank you so much, Mr. Brown, for sharing that. Yeah, it's very powerful. Just reading what's in the chat. Thank you. So powerful. Thank you. A lot of support from the community.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. We're gonna head into our last question, and then we'll open up for Q&A. So if you have any other questions for Avel and Richard, put them in the Q&A chat and we'll get to them. So my last question is for Brian. Brian, you're the co-author of Mr. Brown's book. And I want to hear more about like, how is your role as a co-author of This Is Not For You? And what do you see as the pitfalls and rewards of this type of collaboration?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And I want to try to answer it quick so we can hopefully have a little bit more time to hear from these two. But I think I'll maybe just give a really brief history of our collaboration together. I was introduced to Mr. Brown through a mutual friend who had met him at a community meeting. And at that point, he was looking to write what was maybe more of a pamphlet or a how-to about the activist work he'd done. I knew he was a photographer and an activist, and that's about it. And so we sat down to have lunch at a Jordanian restaurant that he recommended. And I thought I was hopefully just going to help him find some resources, because I didn't think that there was going to be a way that I could necessarily help. But that lunch lasted about 3 hours. And by the end of it, we pretty much decided we were going to write a book together. And then we spent the next, I think, about 6 months every week meeting at that restaurant, and also going to see movies and plays together. And I'd accompany him to DPSST, which is the academy down in Salem where public safety officials are trained, that appears in the chapter that Mr. Brown just read. And finally, after 6 months, I started writing because there was just so much to take in. And then writing took about a year. And then after the writing was done, there was a whole lot of back and forth between the two of us to get it right and make sure that what I put down on paper really felt like what he wanted to express. And it would be a half hour of talking about all of that. But one example I can give is that like I tend to be much more profane than Richard Brown, who doesn't swear at all. And I remember him reading it the first time and us sitting down and him saying, I think you've been watching a little bit too much Shaft. And so we went and removed all the swear words and a lot of other stuff. And that's for another conversation. But I think that connects to the pitfalls that you were asking about. I mean, I see my work here. Neither of us wanted this to be ghostwritten because it just doesn't feel right to have a white voice interpreting a black one and then not have people know about that. And so we wanted to be front and center that I'm a part of it. And no matter all the work that we did to try to remove my voice from the writing, I'm the one who wrote the sentences, right? So so that's there one way or another. And we've done all the work that we can, but I think that that's the pitfall of this kind of collaboration, right? Is that I am involved and I have subconscious stuff that I probably don't recognize coming in. And the other is just, it's really hard. You know, like writing a memoir with access to all of your own experiences is difficult. But I just realized as I was writing this that there's just so much to know to be able to write a book. Luckily, Mr. Brown's a really great storyteller, as I could just call him up and he would tell me more and more and more stories. And I guess really quick, I just say the rewards of it are just the collaboration. It was just such an honor and an amazing thing for the two of us who come from such different places to be able to really connect around this. And it feels emblematic of what Richard Brown has done over the course of his life, which I can't think of a single story in there that is about you doing something alone. It's always partnering with other people. And hopefully this ends up being an example, by no means the first, but maybe another one of how people can partner up, and how like for me it was an effort to ally and to use some of the skill and some of the access that I have to help his voice resonate a little bit more. So hopefully for activists who maybe aren't writers, and for writers who want to use their privilege in one way or another to help stories get told, I hope this in one way I hope that can be one of the rewards of this. There's an example in some way. So thank you for the question and for allowing me to be here with everybody.
Yes, of course. Thank you.
Yep. I'd like to take this moment to also honor my co-author, Dr. Patricia Schechter, Professor of History at Portland State University, my sister friend, who honored my voice in a way that allowed me not to censor my voice. Thank you, Patricia.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing those words. I just want to read some of the praise that y'all been getting in the chat from Judith Mowry. Your life's work has inspired and guided me in ways you can't imagine. I'm so glad you have written the book and I'm looking forward to getting it. We only met in person a few times. I remember them all vividly. I appreciate your newsletter and all the work you do. And then, are y'all ready for some questions from the community? Yeah, good, cool. So first question is, let's go here. Mr. Brown, who do you most hope will read your book?
Cops and people who are trying to bridge that gap to, you know, the reason the cops became a challenge to me is, one of the things I've learned is it's easier to change stuff when you got somebody helping you inside. You know, it's frustrating because you've got to convince people that there's another way to do stuff. You know, so I want youngsters, young people who don't necessarily want to be cops, but want to facilitate change, you know, and for cops, there you know, there are a lot of young cops, young people becoming cops, and they become it for the right reasons, you know, but you're going into a profession that's steeped with racism, authoritarianism, you know, all of this stuff that manifests itself in the way Black folks get treated on the streets. And that's not what they join up for. But if they don't have a constant reminder that that stuff goes on, you know, they fall prey to that line of thinking also.
Okay, we're gonna go into the next question from Laura. Have Mr. Brown's memories been recorded also as audio and or video oral history?
There has been a little of it done orally and visually, and the book will have a audio book attached to it.
Maybe we'll have to do some oral history later on. Maybe that'll be part of my internship.
Well, you know, and that's important because that's the way the word gets by. You know, if a student goes through college and doesn't change their attitude about life, then the college was a waste of time.
Mm.
You know, if all you got out there was how to make $1, you know, you just as bad as the guy we just got rid of in DC.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Okay, we're coming in with questions, so I'm just going to keep it until 2. Mm-hmm. So from Anna, for both panelists, what's your advice to young people in the movement? How do you sustain optimism after in the face of so much struggle and an overwhelming power structure? Where do you find inspiration and what inspires you about the movement today? And I'll put that in the chat as well, so you can read it.
Young people are important to this dialogue because they're going to be the ones that are going to have to carry it on, and they can't wait till they're my age to try to learn. Mm. You know, so they've got to form those relationships that we talked about in the beginning. You know, those relationships are important. And another important thing is, if you want to be an ally, you've got to be able to take the lead from the people who are leading. And you know, one of the problems that I think that has been an issue for the movements is that folks come in and they think, well, I know how to do this. I should be the leader. You know, and when it's based on race, that really becomes a big issue. You know, and the folks don't realize that, you know, all I want to do is help. You know, I'm coming to you to help. I'm not coming to take over your organization. And a lot of times, issues get co-opted. You know, that's why I don't use terms when I talk about our issue. The term I use is Black folk. You know, there's no acronym for me for Black folks, because what happens is everybody else is attached to that acronym, gets what they want, and then in 10 years, we out in the street struggling for the same thing again.
I would like it to be known that my memoir is based on 22 hours of interviews with Patricia Schechter. And I also want to lift up Amanda Gorman, and that brilliant poem from the inauguration. I draw a lot of hope from the words that young woman shared with all of us on the planet. And then also, I want to lift up some work that's happening locally that carries on Richard's legacy. I think about the work of the young Black men who are a part of Word is Bond. Word is Bond. Lakayana Drury is one of the leaders of that organization, and he's also very involved with the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing. And when you look at Word is Bond and their intentional way of going about building relationships with the police right now, again, it echoes back to Richard's legacy, I believe. The work of Sam Sachs and the No Hate Zone is another example. And then today, Race Talks, which was founded by Donna Maxey. Race Talks is featuring a whole community forum on community policing today. And again, I see all of that work as carrying on the legacy of Richard Brown and his work around community policing.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We don't have any more time to answer more questions, but thank you all for being here, for engaging in this conversation, listening to some iconic Oregonians, in my opinion. And yeah, thank you so much for letting me be in conversation with you all.
I want to thank everyone for coming, and I want to especially thank our panelists and Sienna. What a powerful, moving conversation, and I can't wait to dig into the book and read I get first dibs on the books. That's one of the great things about my jobs is I open the boxes and I get to see them first. If your questions didn't get answered in the Q&A, I will email you answers to those questions after this event. Just a quick note, the event will be posted it's being recorded now, and it will be posted on our YouTube channel after the event. So thank you all so much for coming. I wish you all a wonderful weekend.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Marty.
Thank you very much,
Well,
Marty. Thank you, Sienna.
Stay well, everyone.
Good seeing you all.
Congratulations, Richard and Brian.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. All right, I technology.